Hi, I'm Claire, and I'm a member of Relativity's customer experience team. In this lesson, I'll talk about how to explore documents using conversations and concepts. This video is lesson 6 in a series of videos covering the end-to-end ECA workflow in RelativityOne. In the previous videos, we discussed a variety of ways to cull documents. In this video, we'll dive into exploring your documents based on conversations and concepts. All right, so we have so far gone through culling our documents by things like file type, date, key term, center domain, duplicates, language. We also did some keyword expansion to use our concepts and our analytics a little bit. And so now let's actually jump in, and I'm going to minimize this cull documents. I'm going to expand the explore documents, and let's take a look and see what we have here. So if I look at the all option, then what I'm seeing here is, of course, all of my different widgets for all where I'm at across the process. And so all the different widgets are going to load up. I'm going to scroll up here so you can see some of these. And notice that we have, of course, date range again. We've also got our custodian, all of our custodians listed, as well as communication analysis. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And then we've got our key terms again, those SCR key terms in a pie chart as well as in a table. And we've finally got our cluster right here of all documents, and our document list, of course, is included. And so we could from here, we could go through each of these widgets and take a look at culling, but let's jump into these other save searches to see what we can do with this data or with these widgets in this approach. And so the thought here really is that I know who my custodians are. I can see pretty clearly right away which custodians have the most data within my data set. I can also see my communication analysis, and we'll jump in there in just a moment. But remember, I'm down to these documents, right? I've got 4,182 documents that I'm saying, yes, I want to promote these. So let's narrow it down a little bit and take a look at those first. Now I could, of course, I could go and I could do some all custodian analysis here. I could narrow it down by people if there's a specific custodian, and maybe their documents for whatever reason didn't hit on travel or any of those keyword expanded terms. And if that's the case, then maybe I need to pull up my no documents here, and I need to pick and choose my custodians based on no. Or maybe I need to take a look at this little crazy looking dot thing here and zoom in on it. And this is our communication analysis. And so we know just by this right here, this pie chart, that K-Man has 1,823 of the 4,182 documents that are going to be promoted. So maybe we take a closer look at who K-Man is talking with, right? So if I zoom in a little bit, I can click on K-Man, and it's going to narrow me down to just those documents that K-Man is tagged in or is associated with K-Man. And it's also looking at how many of these documents are within this particular conversation. And so I can see, if I look at K-Man, I can look and see who they were talking with. So Heather Kroll was in here. Rorschach Reagan is in here, and so on. And so if I wanted to, I could absolutely choose, let's say Heather Kroll was a person that we wanted to take a look at. So I could choose that, and notice what's happening is I've narrowed my data set now down to 24 documents. And what I want to show you is if I open up my search panel, you'll see to promote as yes is the very first criteria that I set up when I clicked on the yes pie piece. And then I'm looking specifically at K-Man's data, remember, because I saw that K-Man had the most documents with hits out of everybody. And then I further went down and said, okay, who has K-Man been talking with? And if it's Heather Kroll that we want another data set from, then I can absolutely choose that. I could remove some of these. I could uncheck the checkbox, which will bring me to just K-Man's documents where they were talking with Heather Kroll. And notice there's 240. I could delete this one out altogether. I could also add it back in. So really, you can play around with the search criteria that you have set up here, and you can adjust that depending on what your needs are, right? And so this is where we are with this, and we've got 240 documents. I'm not going to promote any of Heather Kroll's documents other than those that have already been identified as being related to travel. So I could layer up here, right? I could say, okay, how many documents belong to K-Man related to travel, where they're talking to Heather Kroll. And then I could sort of do an overlay here to say, all right, if I wanted to, I could look at my cluster set, and we'll look at that in a moment, but I could overlay some terms and things on top of that to see where those documents live. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and let's clear all these conditions. Let's go back to our searches, and I'm going to hide that search criteria information down here. And I want to move into, let's scroll down, got date range, got our doc list. Let's move over to our concepts, and we can take a look at the cluster here. And so we want to see all of our yes documents, and I'm going to hide this here for our real estate purposes. I hid that, and I can see my cluster here. Now, the fun thing about clusters, and I'm actually going to maximize this so we can see all of the fun cluster information. I'm also going to show my search bar, because my search panel, because what I want to do is I want to overlay a couple things on top of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my condition, and I'm going to flip to all fields, and I'm going to type in STR here. And I'm going to see my search term report key terms. Those are all those terms that we saw before. I'm also going to say that there are these conditions, and the STR key term condition is that it is actually set. So meaning that something has been tagged at some point along the way as it being in this particular set. And so what I'm seeing now is really my cluster gets a heat map put over the top of it. And you'll notice that there are anything that hit on one of those key terms that was included in our search term report, the darker the section here, the more concentrated the number of hits. So notice if I point to this, I'll see what my cluster name is at the top. I'll see how many documents within that particular cluster match with my terms. So are they a yes, and are they at least one of those search terms, those search term report terms that we had saved? There's 258 matches within this particular cluster. And then the number of documents is how many documents are in that cluster. There's 278. So really a majority, 92.8% of the matches within here are a hit on either they are to promote or they are a part of those STRs. The subclusters really is just telling you how many subclusters there are. If I move up one, you'll see that that changes from subcluster 0 to subclusters 2. And then I can see the coherent source score. So within that cluster, how conceptually similar are those documents to each other, right? And so that's what we're looking at. And notice that my context help here says double click to zoom in on a cluster. Let's do it. So I'm going to double click here. It's going to zoom in for me. And here are all my terms. And look at this: travel, fare, hotel, car, tickets, airlines. So these are definitely related to travel. We know that already though, because we've already tagged them as yes. But let's take off the yes. Let me uncheck this yes here. And notice what happens now. We're already in a cluster. So let's actually double click here to go back. And now we can see where all those key terms exist. Notice that all these are pretty dark, right? Except for some of these along here. So if I uncheck this one, then I'm going to go back to my original cluster, and I'm going to see all these beautiful colors here. And I can then, let's actually narrow it down a little bit more. Now I have a saved search of all of those travel related terms that we found. And so I could essentially go here and search for, under a term search, I could search for travel with an asterisk out behind it, and I could choose to search that. And notice what's happening. It's narrowing me down to just those documents that have the term travel, travel, traveler, traveling, etc. in there. And you can see the difference here, right? Between the things that we tagged as to be promoted and where they existed. Remember that all those travel documents right over here, right? And so when I just search for travel, I only have 5 matches, which what this is telling me is that I have done the right thing in doing that keyword expansion, because it sure found a lot more documents that are related to travel, not too many more, but that are related to travel that we can certainly have our review team dig into, because maybe, just maybe, there's something in there that they need to know in order to continue forward with whatever the case may be. I can also do things like select multiple slices of this cluster, of these clusters. And so let's say that I wanted to take a closer look at maybe some of these darker ones over here. And maybe there's one over here I want to grab. So I'm going to point to this. I'm going to click it. And then I'm going to wait for it to refresh. I'm going to hold down my control key and I'm going to click on this one and then I will choose apply. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring me back the documents that are within those clusters. And you can see it here that it's bringing me back those clustered documents. And so if I wanted to dig in a little bit more here, I certainly could. But the idea with the heat mapping and understanding what this is telling us is really just where are the matches found within our overall document universe that we've included to cluster? What else is within that cluster that we might need to look at to have a better understanding and maybe to pull in some more documents. Now, for today's session and for the way that we're approaching this, we're not going to pull in any additional documents because we are looking at just those documents that hit on travel and anything that hit on those keyword expansion, like the conceptually similar key terms. And so that's what we're looking at right here. But let me remove this. And I'm going to remove this term travel as well. And notice that just travel, I see a lot of hits. That's where my matches are. But there's only a few in each, right? So 108, 92. But let's go ahead and close out of this. And I'm going to choose a condition and I'm going to say it's in a safe search. And notice I've got travel related terms search saved. And so choose that, choose apply. And now it's going to update and show me all of those terms and where they live. Now I've got highlight matches checked. Let me uncheck that because we want to see that heat map. And once again, those darker sections are where the higher concentration of those documents live. So if you wanted to go in here, let's say, and maybe narrow down a little bit on the documents within this and see what exactly exists around it, you could certainly do that. So that is the idea around the clusters and clustering. And there's a lot more that you can do with those. Please check out our documentation. Please also reach out to our solutions team to find out more about clustering and clusters and how you can use them and all those fun pieces. We've come to the end of this lesson. In our next video, we'll cover how to include related documents like family and email threads. Thank you for joining me.